Welcome back to Big Sky Buckets. I'm Big Sky, and today we're doing our bi-weekly power rankings. Talking about the past couple weeks, which teams rose, which teams fell off completely, all of that good stuff. But before we begin, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Every subscription matters to me as I get this thing up and going, put a lot more effort in to pumping out content, so it'd mean a lot. If you like this episode, give it a like. Comment down below your thoughts, which teams fell too far, which teams rose too high, all of that. If you're an audio-only listener, give it a rate, give it a listen. Let's just jump right into it. So let's start. Got my handy-dandy notebook because I haven't finished the graphic that I typically do before I record these. The two teams that fell out. In the East, the Atlanta Hawks, thank God. I hate watching them right now. They are just an atrocity. It's just an eye-bleeding product on the court. Just the only glimmer of hope with Jalen Johnson being out, which if you are a voter for most improved, you gotta at least put Jalen Johnson in the top 3 because the team with Jalen Johnson versus team without him are two insanely different teams. One is actually pretty solid and has been in these power rankings for a while. The other team is terrible. I think they've won one game on the road against the San Antonio Spurs, who are on a 17-game losing streak. They only beat them by 2 during that game. They've only won a single game since we talked about this last. And they're bottom 2 in defensive rating. What do you want me to say? Their schedule has been hard, but Jalen is truly like the connecting piece of this team, and without him, they are terrible. The team in the West that fell out, the Phoenix Suns, you might be asking why. Well, at 12-10, they still would possibly be in the running for in the playoffs. However, when you look really deeply at this team, with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, they should be so much better, especially against teams above 500. But with a 2-7 record so far and an easy schedule so far, it's kind of misleading, and until they turn that around, I do want to dock them, because the other team that comes in at 16 here seems to be figuring it out, and that is the Los Angeles Clippers. At 12-10, the Big Four is finally starting to mesh. James Harden is doing his playmaking thing. He's one of the leaders in isolation scoring, surprise to absolutely nobody. Well, maybe it's a surprise. Maybe it's a surprise to me because it feels like he had regressed, but he's starting to figure it out, and that's what happens when you don't do training camp and all of that and aren't in game shape. It just took a bit. He's making Zubac's life so much easier with the playmaking, and so all of that is working to perfection. They've beaten the Nuggets recently. I think they've beaten the Mavericks recently. So at 12-10, they come in at the 8th spot in the West right now. I'm going to put them here at 16. At 15, we have, in my opinion, this might just be my own award to give, the roller coaster team of the year. The Miami Heat at 13-10. So when I first did one of these, like a month ago or something, I talked about how the Miami Heat were figuring it out. Well, since then, they had figured it out, and then they kind of didn't figure it out. And they're really missing Tyler Hero right now. He's such a great offensive piece for them during the regular season, at the bare minimum. Say what you will about the playoffs. And with Jimmy Butler's reputation for being an inconsistent regular season player, that is what's hurting this team. They should be way better than they are, and that's kind of what went into this decision-making of putting them at 15. But 13-10 is not a bad record. It's just they're starting to fall a little bit more, not beating teams that they should. It's somewhere between not beating teams that they should and also not beating teams that are good, that they should be able to beat as well. So I'm just going to put them here. Well, again, this is always a team to watch. They might figure it out in the next couple of weeks, and I'll come back here and I'll raise them up, but that it is what it is. At 14, we have a team that rose very barely because they figured out one of their biggest flaws. The Houston Rockets finally won at least one game on the road against the Denver Nuggets. Congratulations. That puts you at 14. It's simple as that. We talked about previously on a TikTok and short that the Rockets, their defense seemed to fall off a cliff when they played on the road. It just didn't travel with them. But because they have won at least one game, you can start to see that they might be on the rise, because if it translates against the Denver Nuggets, it could probably translate to a lot of other teams. So that's where I have them. At 13, we have a team that I have talked about a lot, and they fell a little bit. But the New York Knicks really, really, really struggle to beat good teams. They have lost to the Celtics 3 times. They've lost to the Bucks twice. They just can't seem to beat these teams. And I think that's just because before I've talked about this, they need to make a trade, but they beat the teams they should, but they're just not cut from the same cloth as the elite teams, and that's something that's hurt them. They are interchangeable with this next team, though. Again, I don't need to talk too much about the Knicks because I've talked about them in the past. And nothing has really changed. At number 12, we have a team that also rose, that came into the picture. The Cleveland Cavaliers. At 13-10, they just recently lost to the Orlando Magic last night, so I'm not going to dock them too much for that. They had recently beat them as well. This team is starting to figure it out finally. Darius Garland has been playing great. Evan Mobley has been playing fantastic. Max Strus has been an incredible piece for them. The real question here is probably with Donovan Mitchell and the inconsistencies there, and that just might be I talked about before, it might just be the coaching, but with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley really playing up to the level that they are, and the defense seemingly coming back and the offense starting to get its mojo back, I'm going to put them here because they've beaten really good teams. They seem to be splitting with a lot of these great teams, but Cleveland and New York are pretty interchangeable in my opinion, but Cleveland has beaten better teams overall. At number 11, we have the Sacramento Kings. Now, I had to make a change. Even though they are 13-8, there's at least one team that could be here, another interchangeable one. But I would say that the in-season tournament really made an impression on me, especially the quarterfinals, losing to the Pelicans. And that is because sometimes they tunnel vision, and I really hate this out of the Kings because they've gotten better defensively, which is great, and their offense is still really good, but the tunnel vision happens when they just won't stop. Like, I get wanting to shoot threes, but sometimes in a game, especially against that Pelicans game last week, they tunnel vision when the three starts going in immediately, and then it kind of stops, and they keep wanting to do that. They need to, with a team like this and a roster like this, they need to be able to adapt to the situation. And that is one of the things that I have not enjoyed recently from the Kings. Is like last night, they had a record high, a franchise record high 25 threes made. That's just incredible, but that's not going to happen every game. And so it still doesn't tell me that they're learning from experiences past. I mean, you're going to do that if you're making everything, just keep doing it. But if in times and games when the three isn't falling, they're not really adapting. They're not trying to get to the rim as much as they should. They're not shooting mid-rangers as much. It's just very much, it feels more not James Harden-esque because they have two very good playmakers in Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, but it does feel like there's a mental lapse kind of happening, and that once I see them break that mental lapse in a game against a really good team, even though this team is very good, then I can start moving them back up. But also the reason they're here is because a lot of teams are rising. So at number 10, we have the Dallas Mavericks at 14-8. Now, I wanted to put them at 11, but their record is very good. They also are going through an injury bug with Kyrie out for, it looks like it's going to be a while, because in that game that Dwight Powell fell on him, it looked really bad. But Luka is amazing. I really do think that he could be an MVP candidate this year, like genuinely. And I think I just need to see a little bit more wins against really good teams. It's not that they can't. I've seen them win against good teams. That's what I'm trying to get to. I've seen them win against good teams. I've just also seen them lose more against good teams than they've won. And the injury bug means they'll probably slide before they rise, but I do think they will rise because Luka is playing out of his mind. And number 9, a team that I have very much criticized, but I have to move them up. I wanted to move them up a little bit more, but again, if you're looking for the epitome of inconsistent offense with the offensive talent they have, look no further than the Milwaukee Bucks. At 16-7, they should be way higher, but the eye test is just brutal sometimes. They won last night an overtime thriller against the Chicago Bulls without Zach LaVine. Now, the Bulls had been better since Zach LaVine stopped playing for them. But it's not like they're going to be an elite team. And Dame has been kind of the main crux of the inconsistency. In games that Giannis defers to Dame, he's trying to get Dame more involved. And sometimes, like last night, when you just can't make anything and you shoot so much, it really hurts the team. But I did say recently that I was going to move them up. And I'm a man of my word. But I can't move them up more than some of the other teams above them because of their level of play and more consistency than anything. But yeah, like, I want this to work for the Bucks because it should. It's just, it feels like a coaching issue at this point. And when Terry Stotts was fired before the season even began or walked away, it was bad news for this team. And I think they're really missing that genuine offensive mind to make this all work. Because sometimes it's like, wow, look at this offense. It's incredible. And then other times, like last night, it's like, what the hell is going on? So I put them at 9, top 19. Give them their credit where it's due. They've played better, but as of recently, they're starting to slump again. Or they're starting to fall back into old habits, and it can be rough to watch. At 8, we have a team that I talked about would fall, and I think they might start rising again soon. The Denver Nuggets at 15-9. They are starting to, I can't tell if this is the injury bug or they're exiting the injury bug now, but one of the reasons they fell, actually, was for the past couple of games, aside from last night, Jokic had been playing very poorly, which is bizarre to watch. But he started to find it again last night. So they'll probably move back up. I'm just higher on the Nuggets just in general. I believe in them. But there's just a couple of teams here that have played more consistently during the stretch. And again, if Jokic, it feels more of an outlier when Jokic has a bad game comparatively to, it's just standard for him to have incredible games. So those couple of games hurt them. It hurt them in the short term, but I think in the long run, they're perfectly fine. Especially last night, Julian Strawther was playing amazing and Jamal Murray was playing amazing. They're going to be fine. And that's why I have them at 8. The other teams here have really showcased a lot to me. And I think the Nuggets will rise back up, but I have them at 8. At 7, one of the premier teams of the in-season tournament, the Indiana Pacers. I don't have to talk too much about this. You know, Tyrese Halliburton, he's becoming a star, a superstar in the making. And the main thing here is the thing I've talked about so much about them. They're starting to showcase that they can play defense when they need to. And that's a huge point to me. They've also beaten the Celtics and the Bucks since that time and only lost to the Lakers, who, if you haven't heard the Lakers yet, then you know that they're higher on this list. But that's it. They're on the rise. They're figuring it out. At number 6, one of the only teams so far to have completely and utterly embarrassed the Pacers this year with their number 1 offense. That is the Orlando Magic. Again, another young team on the rise. And like I've talked about before, their defense is incredible. The only reason they fell is just because there's at least 2 teams here that have risen since then and kind of just overtaken them. Because my major issue with the Orlando Magic is the point guard position is kind of concerning when you have to rely on Anthony Black. Like, with where they are in the standings, relying on Anthony Black, a rookie point guard, can be rough in terms of playmaking during times when you really need to get a bucket in a close game. Or even Markelle Fultz, who hasn't really been playing as much for them. And Jalen Suggs is not a playmaking guard. He's a great defensive guard who's started to shoot. But Paulo starting to figure it out. Franz starting to figure it out. And they still don't have Wendell Carter Jr. back, which is insane. But they've just been such a model of consistency for like defense and beating really good teams. But I have them here at 6. At 16 and 7, they deserve to be here in the top 6, especially against like they beat the Bucks, they beat the Pacers. They beat good teams. Number 5, Philly is really good because Joel Embiid is one of the best regular season players you've ever seen in your life. Tyrese Maxey jump is great. Everything is going well for them. They've had a little slippage, but to me, they're still a top 5 team. It's really hard not to look at this team and be like, okay, they're still that great. I think their schedule has been kind of they're playing like the Wizards a lot recently, and I mean they just beat the brakes off the Hawks. I think once they start playing really good teams again, we'll get to see it again. But otherwise, they deserve to be a top 5 team. And number 4, I think the biggest riser in the entire thing, the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm going to give them credit for winning the in-season tournament championship. I think it means a lot to play high-level basketball, one-game elimination style, like March Madness, and win all of them. And win most of them by complete blowouts. Now, you can argue that championship game that I talked about yesterday is not a sustainable factor because you're relying on Anthony Davis to have 41 points. That's not going to happen every game, obviously, because that's not AD's thing. He's an inconsistent offensive player. But everything else that you see from the Lakers recently has been an indicator of something that is working well. Coming back from injury, seeing the defensive-minded role players playing incredible defense, and just it's starting to come together. Like the identity defensively, the offense is getting better, playing to their strengths, all of which I talked about yesterday, so I put them at 4. At 3, a team that has been playing similarly the same style, but it's just that the advanced analytics would tell you that this team is way better than you might think. The Oklahoma City Thunder. I love Chet. I love J-Dub. Shea is great. They're actually number 1 in net rating. And at 15-7, they're just not losing a lot. They're not losing a lot, and they're playing somewhere between bad teams and great teams, and there's not really any losses coming out of it. They look like a bona fide playoff team. They're number 2 in the West. Credit where credit is due. This young team is absolutely flourishing right now. I'm definitely going to make an OKC episode somewhere down the line and really talk about if they're really ready to just kind of cash in the chips and go for it all, because it's starting to lean towards that. Yes, sometimes Chet doesn't have the offensive game you want him to, but even in close games, they find a way to win. So there is that. So top 2, same top 2 as last time. Nothing has truly changed. At 2, I have the Celtics. I think they could have fallen a little bit, and I think there's a path for them to fall more with Porzingis still injured. But at 16-5, they're still really great. Nothing here has truly changed for me. Defense is great. The offense is still very good. There's playmaking issues in my opinion, and I think there might be some coaching issues, like when they played the Pacers in the in-season tournament. But aside from that, same team, same core point. I think they'll probably fall until Porzingis comes back. But again, if they keep beating good teams, if the Celtics keep beating good teams, then there's just not much to be said here. You know, the core issue is the playmaking, and then the your turn, my turn, Brown and Tatum thing can be annoying at times to watch. But otherwise, it's kind of hard to talk about a team whose net rating is as good as it is and say that they're a bad team, because I have higher expectations of them. But they come in at number 2 and the same number 1. The Minnesota Timberwolves at 17-5 are the best team in the NBA currently. You know, the big questions here, now we can start asking real questions. They've stayed here after the last power rankings. They're still at number 1. Anthony Edwards seems to be kind of injured or not playing to the same degree. That is a concern. Another concern is that they've been kind of coasting as of recently, and they're starting to create the target on their back. At a record like this, teams are starting to figure out, okay, this is how we want to attack them. This is how we want to beat them. And I think they're probably going to start soon. They're going to start missing Jaden McDaniels, who needs to come back from injury. Once those guys come back, we can keep them at 1, but there is a path for them. They just lost last night to the Pelicans. Zion went absolutely ballistic. I still don't have them at 1 because their defense is still great. Zion might just be, there's certain teams that, like, matchups matter, and that just might be a bad matchup for him because of the physicality that Zion plays with. But for the most part, not many teams in the West are going to play with that physicality, and therefore, in what is considered the better conference, they deserve to be number 1, especially having the best record still. So yes, that is my power rankings for today. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I don't think I'll be having any more episodes this week because I have to go to Dallas for funeral. I'm not going to get into any details there, but I'm not going to be able to record very much. But I'll have a bunch of shorts and TikToks to hold you guys over until then. But I'll probably be back on like Saturday or Monday for like a full-on episode, kind of maybe some recapping what is happening in the NBA. Otherwise, anything that I might talk about might be coming through shorts, like as in previews of episodes to come. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Sub, like, comment, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next week. Peace.